Hi, Chewy. Let's just begin with identifying how you actually performed in task two. You received a mark of 70 out of 80 or 87.5%, which is a big improvement from your task one mark of 28 out of 40 or 70%. So, this is an indication that your ability to write succinctly and clearly about subject content is clearly improving. If we take a look at your multiple choice section, you received a mark of 17 out of 20. Your responses to questions 5, 18, and 19 were incorrect, unfortunately. Firstly, for question 5, the question was, what are the major economic indicators of integration between economies? Bit of a trick question, but basically this question addresses your understanding of the terminology in topic 1, particularly the syllabus document. If we look at this area here where you're looking at globalization and the key indicators of economic integration. Now, essentially, you'll notice that you've chosen option C, which was incorrect, and in fact, you would have needed to select option B, simply because in option C it talks about economic development, and that's not an indication of economic integration. For question 18, the answer has to be A, not D as you chose. D is incorrect because an appreciation of our dollar improves our terms of trade, that is, the price that we receive for our exports compared to the price we pay for imports. Question 19 saw you choose option C, whereas option B would have been correct. Option C is incorrect because this action would actually increase demand for Australian dollars rather than increasing the supply of Aussie dollars. If we take a look at the short answer section, Chewy, looking at your response, it looks as though you struggled a little bit with question 21A. You received a mark of 2 out of 4. So basically, this is the suggested answer or something that you might want to think about when you're addressing quotas in the future. Originally, without a quota, which is a limit on the quantity of imports, quantity Q was supplied and quantity Q3 was demanded in the local economy. In turn, imports were equal to Q3 to Q. The original price was P. However, with an imposition of a quota, local production increases from Q to Q1. This is because demand has remained constant, yet the number of imports of motor vehicles has fallen. In turn, this process drives up the price of motor vehicles in this local economy, and local production, following the law of supply, begins to increase production. When the price of motor vehicle rises to P1 following the introduction of the quota, demand for local production falls from Q3 to Q2. This is because prices paid for motor vehicles has increased in this economy, as supply of foreign-made cars has fallen following the imposition of a quota. Yet, demand for motor vehicles remains constant, which drives up the price from P to P1. Hence, consumers demand less motor vehicles at the new price of P1. Question 21B. Again, looking at the economic effects of a quota in an economy, you correctly state that a quota improves employment prospects as local producers supply more products. Unfortunately, that only allowed you to get 1 mark when you spoke about the fact that the quota raises government revenue. The quota actually is just a ban or a restriction on the number of imports. If it was talking about a tariff, then obviously the government receives taxation revenue as a result of that type of protection. The government doesn't receive directly any sort of revenue as a result of a quota. So the other economic effects you could have spoken about would have been the reallocation of resources to the motor vehicle industry from other industries in the economy. You could have spoken about a possible increase in inflation due to a price increase following the imposition of a quota. You could also say that there could be the imposition or the introduction of retaliatory protection policies by overseas economies because they might be a bit upset that this local economy has applied a quota and they would retaliate in the same fashion. You could, as you've said, seen an increase in the employment of labour in the motor vehicle industry. So that was good to see. But if you refer to those 4 points, that would have helped you get a couple more marks there, mate. Question 23D. Question 23D was a question relating to, let me just find it for you, Chewy, the persistent current account deficit that Australia has. Now, you receive a mark of 4 out of 5 here, and in reflection, looking back, you were fairly correct all the way through your response. And as of the feedback I've provided, it says that excellent for the most part, especially the breakdown of the net primary income deficit. Unfortunately, you made a couple of crucial mistakes or errors in judgment, which detracted from the quality of your response. And as a result, you couldn't receive a mark of 5 out of 5 for this section. But basically, the key issue was the fact you've talked about Australia always being an importer rather than an exporter. That's great, but when you see an explain question, you need to explain why to the market. Inform the market why Australia has always been an importer rather than an exporter. So we've always imported goods and services because we've had a comparative disadvantage in manufacturing. We suck at manufacturing, and as a result, we rely on other countries for that. So we've had to import a lot of manufactured goods, particularly for the capabilities that we require. We require manufactured capital goods. So as we don't make them, we've got to buy them from overseas. So that's why we've always imported more than we exported in that regard. You could also talk about the fact that Australia's got a small population and we don't have a huge labour force or a capacity in terms of our labour skill to produce certain goods and services. So we rely on other countries to do that as well. And you can also talk about the fact that Australia has imported from many other countries across the world because they have better technology in terms of their ability to produce goods and services because they've had more experience. They're an older country than us. The majority of countries around the world, we're only 200 years old, whereas you're dealing with countries like China and America, they're much older than us, so they've got a bit more skill and knowledge in how to produce goods and services. Question 23. Sorry, question 24D now, which takes a look at explaining the impact of an appreciation of the Australian dollar on the current account. Now, you got 3 out of 4 here, and it looks as though towards the end of your response that you've really sort of struggled to get your mind around this concept. And you've written a couple of dot points and you've crossed out a few concepts or a few sentences, and it looks as though you're a little bit confused. And you don't see that at all from you, Chu, in the rest of the paper. So obviously, this concept just got to your head a little bit. But basically, it's really important you refer to the suggested answer, mate. And the suggested answer gives you lots of pointers in terms of how you can improve your response here. Also, this answer requires you to not only talk about theoretically, but also practically or in real life. The Australian dollar has appreciated since 2001. In 2001, it was around 47 cents after September 11. And basically now it's around 95 US cents. So it's gone upwards since 2001 every single year. I guess in 2008 when the GFC occurred, it fell from about 95 cents down to about 66. So there was a slight blimp on the radar there, a pretty significant blimp actually. But after that, after the GFC period, it's definitely appreciated once again. Got to a high of $1.11 in 2011, fell to about 89 cents towards the end of last year, and beginning of this year it's gone back up to 94 and 95 cents because we've got strong employment data, and also there's a concern in America that interest rates are going to be relatively low for a long period of time, whereas there's expectations that the interest rates in Australia are going to increase soon to prevent inflation, which makes it more attractive for foreigners to invest their money here because they get a greater return on their savings. But basically, in your response, if you made reference to the fact that Australia's recent appreciation of currency from 2008 to 2013 and the associated impacts on the current account, that would have been great. Basically, the Australian dollar has appreciated. At the same time, Australia's current account deficit has dropped. So you need to highlight that link to the marker. You also need to identify or explain why this occurred. So the main reason being that there's inelastic Chinese demand for Australian investment opportunities. In other words, the Chinese are more than happy, regardless of how high the Australian dollar is, to come to Australia and buy properties. They're also more than happy to come to Australia and purchase investments or ownership in public companies in the mining and resource sector because they don't have a lot of freedom of movement in China in terms of their investment, their dollar, and as a result, they come to Australia and they can invest quite a lot of money into the Australian economy, and the Australian government does not put any sort of restriction on that. So there's a lot of freedom here, and that's why the Chinese have come to Australia to invest, despite the appreciation of the Australian dollar. Just to sum up, Chewy, I think you've done pretty well in the task. Continue to be judicious in your preparation and your studies. Any sort of questions, don't be afraid to ask. More importantly, just get to the point, mate. You're a very bright student, but sometimes being bright can cause a few issues for you because you're trying to sound too intelligent. As long as you sound clear and you get to the point, you can't go wrong, mate. Best of luck.